In March, Traveler's Tales, the developers of the LEGO games, had a sale on Xbox where a ton of the games were 50+% off, and I picked up a 3-pack bundle for $12 that included Marvel Avengers and both of the Marvel superhero games. Now, LEGO games are something I have not revisited in a long time. Honestly, I played the original Star Wars games on the PS2 back in the day, and maybe played a few of them on the Xbox 360. I remember playing the original LEGO Batman, for instance. And I did get some of them over the years with Games with Gold, but I have not revisited many of them or even taken the time to play something like Pirates of the Caribbean, which I got free with Games with Gold, and is even compatible with the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X and S. So overall, the LEGO games are tremendously accessible. For one, they're very cheap games to purchase, and two, they're available on so many platforms. I mean, many of these games were even ported to the DS, the PSP, the Vita. I mean, the Wii U even had a substantial number of LEGO games. I have the LEGO The Hobbit on the Wii U. So these games really hit every single console they possibly could during the time periods that they were released, and even made their way onto other platforms later on, be it through the backwards compatibility program on the Xbox or other, just ports to get them onto newer hardware. So these games, many of them, I can't even tell you offhand, probably darn near 15, are available on many platforms, as well as coming from a ton of different franchises. If you're into superhero stuff, they got you covered. You like Harry Potter, boom. Star Wars, we recently saw a Star Wars game released like a week or two ago, and I haven't checked that one out and probably won't, because again, these games are heavily discounted. It's kind of like a Ubisoft title. I'm just going to wait for it to get discounted. They had Indiana Jones games back in the day, like Pirates of the Caribbean, like I said. Just a ton of different franchises that are really popular saw their games released as LEGO titles. And while these games are marketed towards children, they are oftentimes the best ways to play a video game with these characters in the modern era. I mean, you take into account many of these superheroes in the Marvel games aren't accessible in other games because there's some really obscure heroes in those games. Or you compare this to Marvel Avengers, the Square Enix game, and overall it's just a better, cleaner experience to play the LEGO game, even though they don't have overlapping gameplay mechanics, and one is geared more towards children. It's a better quality game at the end of the day, graphics aside. But that's an interesting point to make about all of this. Oftentimes, I go and I look up a game, an older game, on r/Patient Gamers on Reddit. Now, the consensus they have about the LEGO games are they're games for kids, and you shouldn't come into them with a high expectation of receiving a great gameplay experience out of them. However, I disagree with this, and I've found the LEGO Marvel games that I've played so far to be very enjoyable. Yes, are the puzzles a little bit easy? Of course, but I also don't like overwhelmingly difficult puzzles. Are the controls relatively simplified? Oftentimes in many of these titles, I believe, not using any of the back trigger buttons. Yeah, that's the case. But also, I don't like games that are overly complicated with their control schemes. So it's a very straightforward gameplay experience that really works well, especially when you're playing with a younger gamer. If a parent and a child wanted to play a video game together, the LEGO games would really be the first thing I would recommend. The co-op in the LEGO games is something that's rarely seen in modern games, but really the overall atmosphere and feel of playing a LEGO game is something unlike I see in most modern games. They do have microtransactions to an extent. There is some add-on content that is sold separately. However, usually there's a deluxe version or something of the like that will include that content straight out the gate. But for the most part, what you're getting with any LEGO game is a massive library of characters and content that's purchasable using the game's in-game currency of studs or just from progression. I mean, we're talking over 100 characters are playable in those LEGO Marvel superhero games, and many of them are going to be unlockable through gameplay, and the rest are going to be purchasable with studs that you earn in the gameplay. The amount of content on offer in these games that's all there and not paywalled off is fantastic to see. And for those of you that want the extra content, again, oftentimes there is different deluxe versions or whatnot that are available to just get you all of that added content right out the gate. And this is something that I feel like we see so rarely and is honestly a breath of fresh air for a franchise that caters towards kids. But again, there's a lot of different inside jokes in these games that you'll understand if you're familiar with the content matter. Now, if you've never read a Harry Potter book, watched a Harry Potter movie, but you decide to play Lego Harry Potter, well, that's okay. You'll understand the gameplay and the general story, and it'll be explained in there. But if you really want to understand the deeper meanings of these jokes, you have to understand the source material. And I think that that's why these games are so fantastic for adult players that do understand the source material, because there are some jokes that go pretty deep into the lore of things. And then it's worth mentioning that as somebody that played the Lego Star Wars games way back in the day, is the games have evolved quite a bit. The core gameplay is the same, the same jump, attack, build buttons are there, but the gameplay has evolved to incorporate open world segments in many of the more recent games. I'm talking, Lego Marvel Superheroes, there's an entire wide open city for you to explore and check out various things in. And there is one Lego title that's even kind of a clone of GTA in a way, or it wants to be GTA, and that's Lego City Undercover, that has that open world feel completely at its core, but that doesn't deter from the fact that the open worlds are incorporated into many of the other Lego titles, particularly the ones that released on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 generation, though some older back, looking at the Xbox 360 or the PS3, had these as well. Something like Lego Batman 2, which was exclusive to that generation, was the first one to have an open world. Now, a lot of these games did transcend generations to a degree. These aren't, high graphic, really crystal clear, play them in 4K type of games, because obviously these are Lego characters, they're blocky by nature. And because of that, we saw many of these Lego games coming out even late in the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 lifespan, where even if you don't own a more recent console, or your kid has a console in their room and it's, maybe not the most recent console, it's a PS3 or something, you can still get many of these games on that platform. So then the question becomes, what Lego game do you pick up first? And of course, I'd recommend you stick to buying whatever's on sale, but oftentimes more than one of them is available on sale at a time. So I think it really boils down to buy a game that's from a franchise that you like. If you like Harry Potter, buy a Harry Potter game. You like Lego Star Wars, buy a Star Wars game. Stick to a franchise that you're familiar with and you like for your first Lego title. And then after that, if you like the overall gameplay experience, you're going to get a similar experience in other Lego games, so then maybe explore different ones that you're not as familiar with the source material on. As previously mentioned, Lego City Undercover, as well as I guess the Lego movie games, are not based on existing franchises. They're more original, and in that respect, they may seem like a good way to get into playing Lego games. And Lego City Undercover, I'll agree with, is a great one to pick up to begin with, but I do not recommend the Lego movie games at all. There's a ton of different ones you could check out before those, because the Lego movie games, especially the second one, are very bare bones experiences, and overall just not something you want to get yourself involved in for your first Lego game, because they are very thin on content. I think it's their one misstep was those games. Now, all these games are available digitally on the Xbox storefront or on the PlayStation storefront, with the exception of Lego Lord of the Rings. I mentioned Lego Hobbit before. I own the disc of that on the Wii U, but that one's available digitally. Lego Lord of the Rings has been delisted, so that's the only one where if you want to have a digital collection, you'll have to look for Lego Lord of the Rings on its own separately. You won't be able to download that one. So regardless of your age, I think it's worth taking a look at a Lego game, picking one up, and trying one out. I mean, they're inexpensive enough. Maybe you already have some from Games with Gold, and especially the newer games that have an open world experience and just a massive amount of content to unlock. These games are worth your time, and I honestly recommend you check out at least one of them from a franchise that you enjoy. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.